Welcome to the Anti-Self-Help Guy. Today, we've got an exciting episode. We'll be talking about leadership, resilience, and what it takes to succeed as a leader inside the military and also out. We are joined by Baz Stokes, a senior leader in the British Royal Air Force as a helicopter pilot and also experienced executive coach. Baz, so nice to see you. Tell us a little bit about yourself.
Hi, Lars. So I've been a frontline helicopter pilot for the last 23 years now. Been fortunate enough to still be doing the job at the age of 44 that I wanted to do as a 7-year-old boy. And for the last 15 or 16 years, I've spent that time teaching instructors, trainee pilots, and future leaders across the Air Force how to operate in the most challenging environments, how to lead others in there, whether that's from a crew of 3 people all the way through to 20 aircraft conducting really complicated night missions in simulated or actual combat environments. And for the last 3 to 4 years, I've been translating that across into the real world as well, working with various companies and individuals outside. And it's been a fascinating journey.
So, Baz, I have to ask you a question that almost everybody that's listening is curious about. You've flown in some of the most critical situations, particularly during wartime. What event or what elements can occur in the cockpit that build leadership and resilience?
So I think they're two different things. For me, the elements that have built resilience over time haven't been one defining event. It's more the culmination of lots of individual events. And I know it's something that I want to sort of keep referring back to is the aggregation of these sort of things. But we spend a lot of time training to a quite a high level, but that also means you expect a very high level of performance from yourself. And as you would expect, I would imagine when you're trying to operate at the highest level you can, personally, I've been through a number of instances where it just gets a little bit much. And what has taught me from myself and from others is about how you can maintain the level of performance without eventually breaking. So when I talk about resilience, it's not one individual event, it's the aggregation of lots and lots of ones and how you can make that genuinely sustainable.
What leadership lessons have you brought home since flying in a war zone?
The starting point for a lot of people is they will come to me and they will say, "Hey, this is what you've done. You've led and you've taught people to lead in these really complex, high pressure tactical environments. You're pulling teams of 200 to 300 people together in a 24-hour period to go and execute something highly complex. So you've got to form a team really quickly. You've got to get the credibility. You've got to get everyone pulling in the same direction, often from different nationalities, possibly not even located in the same place. Go and execute a complex task and then potentially never see each other again." And you've got to stand up in front of all these people who are, lots of them, the stereotype of aircrew. So they're loud, they're opinionated, they're arrogant, they're all of these things. And I can say that because I'm in the club. And I can also say it because it's true. So talk to me about like leadership, Baz. Talk to me about how you do this because you must be super confident and how do you do these things? And one of the biggest lessons that I try and bring across to people is that what you see on the surface isn't necessarily what you get. Almost everyone that I've ever worked with, be it in the military, be it outside, at any level, what people see on the outside and what's going on the inside are not the same thing. But more importantly, the story we tell ourselves at the surface level is often also not what's really going on the inside. And that ability to understand yourself and what you do and how you react and where you're at your best and where you need your team around you, that's where the real power comes from. And that is absolutely portable across any environment.
So, when you moved into executive coaching, what were the similarities or differences that you found from the military?
I think the single biggest similarity is the quality of people that you work with. So people are very competent, very high functioning. They are generally curious. But the other similarity is that if people are very competent, very capable. They are also very good at avoiding questions that they don't want to answer. They're very good at giving a credible surface level answer to themselves and other people, and then moving on. So breaking down those walls of introspection to help people understand themselves is absolutely a challenge in a hierarchical environment, but it's also a challenge that people who are moving into leadership positions, who people who are moving into executive level positions can face, because they've got there based on all of the things that they've done. And to take a good hard look at that and understand what might not be as good as it could be or what might need to change sometimes threatens the underpinnings of everything that you've told yourself about yourself for the last X number of years.
Let's talk about resilience. It's a word that gets thrown around a lot. So what does resilience mean to you?
Resilience for me, I really like the dictionary definition. I genuinely do. It is about the ability to bounce back from difficulty. If a material is resilient, it is able to return broadly to its original shape after being put under stress. It's that bit. So it's not strength, it's not resistance, it's not being inflexible to the point at which you crack. But it's about the ability to bend and shape under pressure, and for people as well, hopefully not only return to the shape they were in, but actually absorb that and grow and become even stronger as a result.
How do different people interpret resilience, and why does it matter?
So that's a question that I think a lot of people ask, and the problem is that they ask one person that. Very few people actually go and say, hey, Lars, how do you interpret resilience? Hey, Baz, how do you interpret it? Because I guarantee you, even after this conversation, our definitions will be different. And therein lies a lot of the problem, is we use the same word to describe different things, which means we're coming at it from a different perspective, which means our understandings are different, which means our expectations are different, which is always going to lead to difficulty. So in terms of how you deal with it, how you develop it, how you do all of those things, it's back to the beginning of having a clear and shared understanding. Why do we not have that clear and shared understanding? Because people don't ask the question. Regularly, people don't ask, and the reason why they don't ask is different. Sometimes it's because they just assume. They assume that they know what it means. Actually, the surface level answer that almost any of us give is not the real answer that we would give after 10 minutes of thought. Maybe they assume that what they think is what the other person thinks, which is almost certainly not true. And maybe they're scared of the answer. Maybe they're worried about it. Equally, maybe they don't care. It could be any one of those things. But if you don't know, you're never going to be on the same page, and you're never going to be able to develop that in yourself and other people.
Can you share an example of somebody that thought resilience was about toughness and found that they were really mistaken?
Yeah, so I've got a number of examples of people I could go to. But I would actually use me because I'm quite representative of a number of the high performers that I've got, and I've been in the role that I'm done long enough that they are mainly a product of my training now. For the first 5 or 6 years of my life, I spent an inordinate amount of time in Baghdad, very high tempo operations, very high stakes operations. The cost of entry, the table stakes were professional excellence, and then it was upwards from there once you were deployed. So in my mind, I interpreted that as we can't make mistakes. We've got to be excellent all the time. There's no room for any error. So every time something goes wrong, I just need, I've got to push through it. I've got to push through it. I've got to keep going. And actually, that wasn't what it meant at all. And as I've grown into the job, as I've grown into instructing and understanding it more, it's not about that, because that's all based on an external view of what I do, and that's based on technical competence. Actually, it's about recognizing what went wrong, putting it into context, being able to grow quickly in the moment, and then for me now, being able to pass those lessons on to other people as well, making sure people can see the mistakes that I've made, making sure I'm comfortable that that's okay to make those mistakes. So the resilience isn't about being a seawall, being a barrier to put up against any of the pressures. It's about more being the coastline, and sometimes things sort of move up and down, but at the end of the day, it's still there. It just shapes and it changes in response to the environment.
Mm.
So that's kind of how I've changed my mindset on resilience over time. Because at the end of the day, you put a seawall in front of the sea, eventually the seawall crumbles.
Working in military environments, what does psychological safety mean to you?
It means that you disagree openly, clearly, and honestly, and nobody takes it personally. That's the short version. The slightly longer version is that you've set the conditions that you can do that. And I never understood how uncommon that was until I started working outside. Um, I've heard so many times, yeah, we have a psychologically safe team because everyone gets on really well and we always come to an aligned position. If you don't have disagreements, if you don't fight like cat and dog behind closed doors, you don't have a safe environment because you don't have a group of people that always agrees. And if those disagreements are never coming out, it's because people aren't willing to say it.
You say that you feel uncomfortable in the room when no one challenges you. Why?
Because I'm not clever enough to have the right answer 100% of the time. I mean, I agree, so I might be arrogant enough to think I am, but I think as part of our upbringing, professional upbringing, everyone is expected to challenge, to ask questions, to push back against the first idea, because the first idea probably isn't the best one. It doesn't mean it's bad, but it could always be better. And if nobody's asking those questions, then either they don't feel that they can do it, they're not engaged with it at all, or I'm doing something fundamentally wrong, which isn't enabling that. And all of those things worry me because eventually, in our world, that leads to an accident.
What happens to a team of people that are working together when they're not shut down, as opposed to actually being shut down every time they have an idea?
From the outside, well, so two things. You end up with a team that is really, really productive and that is like I would say it's like a family. It's like a good family. And by a good family, I mean one that gets on well together. So you have a team, and I had a boss like this recently who genuinely encourages debate. They know what they're good at, they know what their team are good at, and they set the expectation early that you are expected to challenge all of these ideas, but you're challenging them not to prove a point, not to prove who's clever, not to advance your own cause, but to make the idea, the organization, the output better. If you looked at that from the outside without understanding the context, it might look quite fractious. It might look like a lot of bickering. It might look like the Sunday dinner at somebody's house when you have a big family and everybody's talking over each other and people are being mean to each other. But what you wouldn't know because you didn't have the context is the depth of respect that it needs that's there, that the understanding of the roles that everybody plays, and that everyone is pulling in the same direction. What you would see if you were just on the outside is when they came out of the room and they've made a decision, everyone is aligned behind that decision because they've agreed, they've coalesced behind the best or the least worst decision. And that's the way we're going. And we're all going in that direction because everyone buys into it.
That, wow. I need to make sure that I promote that a lot more to the book me team.
It's my starting point for everyone that I work with, right? Is CEO type folk who tells you you're wrong. Because if you can't tell me right now who tells you you're wrong, then no one's telling you you're wrong and you're a little bit fucked.
Mm.
So, constructive dissent rather than destructive consent. Rupert Grint. It's a really, really important thing because if everyone nods and agrees, no one's engaged and everything's going to fail at some point. It's Enron, right?
So, what's one principle you stand by?
I think one of the big ones is about integrity, and it's intellectual integrity and it's honesty. And that goes back to the point about the ability to disagree agreeably, the concept of constructive dissent, the alternative, which is destructive consent. Everyone nods and agrees, and you've got the room full of people in the boardroom who say this, and nothing comes out and nothing gets spoken, and eventually the organised collapses. And the worst thing, when you think back to an aviation organisation, is there's been a crash, and somebody says, "I knew that guy was going to crash." And these lessons have been learned in the aviation industry through blood over years and years and years and years. And I've always flown in aircraft with multi-crew, so it's never been one person in on their own. And that is so fundamentally important. It is expected of the most junior person in the organization to speak up through whatever medium that is, because you don't want to be the guy who's sat there after a crash going, "I saw that coming." And it's not only that the conditions are set for that, but it's an expectation. You haven't done your job properly if you haven't challenged. It's not just you can challenge me, Lars. You are expected to challenge me. Nicely, obviously.
You talk about confidence in uncertainty. What does that actually mean in real life, especially with your background in the military and having to adapt and do those things?
For me, it's not necessarily so much about your confidence in the thing that you are doing, it's confidence in your own skills to adapt to the unknown. You can prepare and you can study and you can learn and you can have all the knowledge, but there will always be something that throws you off track. The conditions will be different, the weather, something will be different. If you understand why you are doing things, then you can adapt to the change. It's the idea of your North Star, your direction, and the path may not be straight, but how do you understand where you're going and what you're doing so that you can adapt? So if you do end up off course, that's okay, because I know I can get back, rather than a rigid set of processes that have to be followed in a linear fashion. And if I get blown off course, I don't know how to get myself back. That's what I mean by that confidence in uncertainty.
Do you think that leaders in today's managerial worlds are too obsessed with their professional skills over their skills on actually problem solving or adapting to change?
I think in most organizations, there is a focus on technical competence, let's call it. A lot of the time, that's because that's the thing that got first-time managers promoted to management, was being good at doing the job. A lot of the time, it's because the organization still assesses them on doing the job rather than managing and leading other people. And that's the same in really large and really small organizations. Management and leadership is not often taken as an end in itself. It's a thing that happens in the background, but it isn't a thing that happens in the background. It's the thing that enables everybody else to do it. And an important framing for me is the change in your role as you move up. Your job as a leader of an organization is not to do the job. It's to provide other people with the tools, with the conditions, with the resources, with the ability, with the boundaries, such that they can do their jobs effectively. Some of the best leaders I've ever worked for looked like they didn't do anything because they empowered their people and they gave them the resources and they got the heck out of the way. But that is a completely different skill than doing the thing that got you promoted into management in the first place. And management then leads on into the leadership bit.
You've led in the military and now you're coaching leaders as an executive coach. Now, how do you spot a good leader?
I think that's a question that actually I would bounce straight back to whoever's asking the question. What's a definition of a good leader to me might be totally different for somebody else. The style of leadership that works in one organization will be different than the style in another. For me, the traits of a best leader is not someone who does something in a certain way. They can adapt. They can pull on different styles of leadership when it's appropriate and when it's not. You know, the sort of the coaching servant leadership is all very much in vogue at the moment, rightly so, but like any strength, it can be overplayed. Sometimes you need someone to be really clear, set a vision and say, right, follow me, let's go. They're not the person who's shouted at everyone, not listened to anyone when they framed that vision, but that inspiration. There's a good reason Steve Jobs was so successful, right? Because he could get everyone behind him with that vision and point the direction to go. So I think the best leaders are those who are adaptable and understand their own limitations.
Tell me of a situation in the military where you had to face the unknown, and what situation was it?
The biggest example, I think, is launching with incomplete information. So we were in Baghdad a number of years ago now, set off on a task. You get a short time to brief. We get airborne. There's a number of helicopters at night going to land at a very specific point in the city. Halfway through this, the lead aircraft's navigation systems completely fail. We, as the number 3 aircraft, get thrown the task of navigating. So now I'm trying to guide someone who is 300 meters that way onto the 7,000th house in the city. As that happens, we get there, that works. We're going to go and get some fuel. All of a sudden, something's changed. You've now got to go back in. You've got to pick people up. You've got to reconfigure the plan on the hoof. You've now ended up with people split in 2 different environments. One of the aircraft, it just so happens, has had a minor technical fault, so they've had to split off to somewhere else. And then all of a sudden, it's gone from, we're going to go and do something which is very difficult, but it's what we train for, and it's relatively straightforward. So we're doing a single assault, and now you've got all of your assets scattered to the 4 winds. You're rolling onto 2, 3, 4 subsequent tasks over a period of 7 or 8 hours, trying to get your team back together because they're scattered all over the place, and doing all of this in an environment where at least half the people on the ground would really rather you're not there. That actually has a lot of parallels to stuff that people do in terms of dealing with the uncertainty, the change, trying to treat problems with not enough assets and not enough time.
What was your takeaway?
The single thing that let us get through it was the fact that we were really good at the basics. And we understood what we were trying to do. The actual way in which we did it wasn't the way we trained to do half of it, because we had to make it up and make it fit as we went along. But because we knew what we were trying to achieve, we knew what corners we could cut and what were the absolute non-negotiables as we went through. So it was a difference between making it up as we went along and picking the most important elements that were absolutely required to get the mission done safely. And that is not the same as just turning up and cuffing it on the day.
The one thing that is interesting to me is that your lead helicopter was the one that lost its navigation. So how do you translate that into today's corporate world, that example?
I mean, if you were to really stick with the analogy, then this is a potential lack of sort of awareness about the position from the top of the organization, right? And in this instance, it wasn't that they were just being pig-headed and wanted to be in charge. For the purposes of the mission, we had to be in particular places. So it's the ability at the lower levels of the organization to be able to push the information up, not just the opinions, but the information, the impact, the things that the people at the top of the organization might not know, to be able to steer the organization, the formation, to get to where you want to do, to achieve the mission that you've been set. And that isn't to all be in a certain place at a certain time. It's actually to achieve the effect that you're after at the end. And the only way that we could achieve that is we genuinely understood what effect we were trying to achieve. And too often in organizations, people don't understand the effect they're trying to achieve. They're just doing the job that they do.
I hate this question, but I'm going to ask it anyway. Fake it till you make it.
Hateful term, isn't it?
What does it mean to you?
So this, I think, comes back to the idea that, oh yeah, you're a pilot, you must be super confident. Help me be more confident. The vast majority of people, what you see is not what's actually happening underneath. But I think it's important to understand it. In today's world, the idea of faking it till you make it is regularly portrayed as Do make believe, turn up and do the job and pretend you know what you're doing, and eventually you'll figure out what you're doing. That is absolutely not the idea of it. The idea is to have the required degree of technical competence, but not be happy standing in front of a room of 30 people, for example, telling them what to do. So that it's about faking the confidence, not the competence. If you fake competence, it will go catastrophically wrong at some point. You can't fake your way to ability. What you can do is give an impression of confidence, because you, Lars, are probably not going to follow me into combat if you think I don't know what I'm up to. But I can know exactly what I'm about and still give you the impression that I don't know what I'm doing if I just sort of, if I give you a brief before we go and invade another country a bit, no one's following that guy. But the same information coming across in a different way gets people believing behind it, but it's not about the quality of the information, it's the quality of the delivery.
How do you actually balance the idea of faking it till you make it with having the competence and having the competence?
I don't view it as a balance. I view them as two parallel things. To a large extent, you can teach competence. With enough time and enough resource, you can teach most people to do most things. Flying helicopters by night is a complicated thing, but also the first time people drive a car, it's a complicated thing. When you've been driving a car for 3 or 4 years, you can drive halfway across the country and barely have any idea how you got there. Technical skills are a bit like that as well, but that also doesn't necessarily inspire confidence in the people, in yourself, or in the people that you're doing. This is exactly how I came to coaching. We had people who were on frontline operational squadrons who could do all of the things, but didn't back themselves to make the right decisions. Therefore, they would run out of time to do the things and then would do them badly because they didn't have enough physical time to put the helicopter where they wanted. None of this was a technical competence issue. It was a confidence issue. And it was about working with them to build the confidence in their own decision making, to help them understand what it was that was causing them to second guess themselves the whole time, despite the fact they could do it, and what steps they could put in place to allow them to go and act in the way that they wanted to, even though they didn't fundamentally believe it. Because certainly in our world, you are, even as in a crew of 3 people, you have to instill a bit of confidence in your crew. And you have to understand the difference between blind, mindless optimism from the chap who's in charge and the quiet, confident, don't worry, chaps, it'll be okay. I've got this. Is there any reason why I'm doing something daft?
What does a leader look like if they have the competence but don't have the confidence for the actual role?
I think to a large extent, and this might sound a little bit harsh, to me, with my background, they often don't look like a leader. They look like a really competent manager. And the distinction I make there is they can do the things, they can enable other people to do things, they can put the processes in place, but and leadership is not all about being inspirational, but the ability to genuinely form a team behind a particular goal, to articulate that vision so that people really understand where we're all going and what the end state is, often isn't there. Because even if all of the words are there, people don't listen to the words you say a lot of the time. They listen to the delivery, they listen to how it comes across. And frankly, it's not about what you say, it's about what they hear. So that, to my mind, is the difference. It's no difference in what they're doing, but it's the impact you have. And for me, more than anything else, it's the impact that makes the leader.
In your eyes, what's the difference between being a leader and a manager?
I think the really short version would be that the leader is the person who sets the vision, who brings the team together and provides that more strategic direction. And the manager is the person who enables that to happen. You can have someone with lots of vision and, yes, this is brilliant, we're going to go over here. But if you don't have any things, if you don't have any cars, you don't have any helicopters, you don't have any fuel, you can't go over there. Conversely, if you've got all of the stuff in the world but nobody knows where you're going, then everyone's just milling around and not achieving anything. I think the best people I've ever worked for and with are able to do both of those things and know when the more managey side is appropriate and when the more leadership side is appropriate. And clearly it works best of all when you've got people fulfilling both roles. But in my mind, that's the differentiation between the two.
What do you think leaders misunderstand the most about resilience?
I think it's why it matters. I think, as with so many things, people tend to focus on the detail as opposed to why it matters. Why do you, as a leader, want to be resilient? What does it even mean? Why do you want your team to be resilient? Yes, we want to be good to people. Yes, clearly we have a duty of care to them. Yes, we don't want people to burn out. But also at a slightly higher level, so like why? Beyond being a good person, it enables me to do more for longer. It enables me to produce my best work. It enables a genuinely resilient team is the one where when someone is struggling, somebody else steps in. So it's not about individual resilience, it's also about the resilience of a team and an organization. And if you think that resilience is just about having half a day off a week to go and do whatever your pet project is, you're fundamentally missing the point. Because why are you doing that? Well, you're doing that to enable all of these other activities and to get the best performance out of people. So I think that higher level understanding is often not considered.
For the leaders listening out there, how do you actually build resilience in yourself and in a team?
Honesty, I think, is the first one. Genuine honesty with yourself, not calculated, measured honesty with your team. There is a real power to sharing the fact that you're not certain about everything as a leader. You'll notice I'm shying away from using the word vulnerability here, because it needs to be for a reason. And there is a bit of a tendency sometimes to make this an oversharing exercise from leaders. I will share the fact that I'm not 100% confident because I don't think it's useful for my team to think that I'm a know-it-all. I don't think it's useful for them to think that I've got the answers to everything. But also, I need to show them, not just tell them, but I need to show them that it's okay not to know, but that's not the end. So it's not just, oh, well, Baz doesn't know. Okay, well, I don't know. So how am I going to solve the problem? What do I need from all of you? What are the steps that we're going to work through so that eventually between us, we do all know? Because just assuming that people will understand all of that inherently, why would they? So that not only building resilience in yourself, but showing people how you can do it.
In the military or even outsides, if you could teach a new manager one thing about psychological safety, what would it be?
Your actions speak way more loudly than your words ever can. You have to set the conditions, you have to lead by example, and you have to do it repeatedly over and over and over again. The concept of a just culture in aviation, whereby if you make an honest mistake and you own up and you put all of the reasons why the mistake happened out there so that other people can learn from it. And then if it was an honest mistake, there is no comeback on you. If it was negligence, that's a different thing. But if it's the sort of substitution test, would somebody else in your position, knowing what you knew at the time, reasonably have done the same sort of thing? If the answer is yes, then that's kind of all right. But you need to set that example. You need to give the examples of the things that you have not done, or that you've done that haven't worked. But then you need to show how you fixed that. You need to set the conditions for your team to ask you those questions. You need to not take no for an answer when everyone goes, no, you're doing a great job, Baz, it's all fine. You need to reward the developmental feedback that comes, and you need to keep doing it over and over and over again, because it only takes one instance of someone being disciplined or slapped down for the thing that you've said you want to destroy months or years of work building that culture. So actions, actions, actions.
So we've got two traditions on this podcast. One of them being to ask you what your daily practice is. And I'm really excited to hear this because From your experience in the military, outside and as an executive coach, what's one thing that you would suggest listeners do?
Focus on asking better questions. Don't go looking for answers for everything, especially for the hard questions, but focus on how to ask better questions, because the better questions you ask, the better answers you'll end up getting.
Our second tradition on this podcast is called 20 rapid fire questions. What's the biggest myth about resilience?
That somewhere in there involves people being broken. It doesn't necessarily.
Why do people misunderstand fake it till you make it?
I think it's because of the word fake. People think it's about pretending, and it's not. It's about presenting different face rather than different competence.
So what would you say fake it and you make it should be understood as?
Um, Putting your best foot forward, putting a brave face on it, something like that.
What's the number one mistake leaders make under pressure?
Jump into a conclusion, thinking that they need to be right straight off the bat. There's always time. Even in a burning aircraft, there's always time to think.
Why is psychological safety the hidden superpower of great teams?
Because without it, you don't have a team. At the best, you have a group of people who are doing work alongside each other. If you can't interact with each other, you aren't really a team.
What does team culture mean to you? For example, when you worked in the military, what did culture mean there?
The culture is, for me, is what everybody understands. It's what you would describe your team as being like to your friend when you're out for a meal. It's the thing that nobody knows and no one can put their finger on, but it outlasts any one of us.
What's more dangerous, overconfidence or self-doubt?
Overconfidence.
Why?
Yeah, I said that confidently, didn't I? You like that? In my world, if somebody's really confident and really convincing, then you will believe they know what they're doing, and they just might not. If someone's self-doubting, then they will always be asking questions. It's also dangerous, but it's not as dangerous.
What's the best way to rebuild confidence after failure?
Understanding, support, and empathy, not sympathy, but empathy from people around you, an acknowledgement of what has gone wrong, and genuinely understanding why. Because if you don't understand why, you'll never be able to fix it, and you'll always be doing the thing you've been told to do.
In your eyes, as an executive coach, what is the difference between sympathy and empathy?
Empathy is understanding where someone comes from. Empathy is acknowledging the fact that things are bad. Someone's had a bad day, something's happened. It's not saying, "Oh, it'll be all right," or just offering the platitudes. It's sitting with them in the uncomfortable. I'm really sorry that this bad thing has happened to you, but it has happened. It's being with them in that discomfort.
And sympathy?
Sympathy to me feels more surface level. There's not as much understanding in it.
Why is disagreement essential for leadership?
Because nobody has all of the right answers all of the time. And if you can't get all of the ideas into the room, you can't get all of the points of view into the room, then you aren't a leader. At best, you're the person who everybody reports to and who runs the payroll. At the end of the month, you're not really genuinely leading a team.
What do high performers get wrong about resilience?
I think it's equating resilience with strength, and they're not the same thing. This isn't about being that brittle front. This is about the ability to bend, adapt, and grow based on the forces and experience that you have.
Can resilience be learned or is it innate?
Absolutely, anything can be learned. Different people have different thresholds, but anything can be learned.
Can confidence be learned?
Oh, heck yeah, absolutely. I'm living proof of that. And they are intrinsically linked to me. The confidence comes from a genuine understanding of your own abilities, of your own shortfalls and your areas for growth, and an acceptance of the fact that that's okay. And And I think for everybody listening, as a professional military aviator, it probably only took me 10 or 12 years of being on frontline operations to genuinely get comfortable. So it is not an overnight business, but you can absolutely grow that.
What's one sign a team doesn't feel safe to speak up?
A meeting or a conversation with almost no interaction, or potentially with vigorous agreement across absolutely everybody. The thing you might not see is all of the conversations that happen afterwards in groups of ones and twos. People leave a meeting and then lots of people immediately start having quiet conversations.
What's one thing or some things that a leader can do in the short term to build psychological safety in a team?
I think you can almost mandate and then reward challenge. Give someone the job, explicitly give someone the job of finding the problems, of red teaming any idea, and then congratulating them, rewarding them for those elements which you go and fix, or which you at least try and fix. And I think the second one is to acknowledge the fact that it's a problem. If you have to say, hey, Lars, you can trust me, you probably can't trust me because I shouldn't have to say it. But naming that up front is at least honest. And honesty is the root of all that psychological safety.
What's the toughest lesson the military taught you about leadership?
How to say no, I think, especially in an environment where the stakes are incredibly high and the expectations are incredibly high and the users you are working with are the best in the world, turning around and saying no, turning around and saying no to going and picking somebody up who is in the middle of dying because it's too dangerous to take an aircraft out there, that's way more difficult than saying yes to something dangerous.
What's one tool for handling uncertainty anybody can try today?
Understand why you're doing whatever it is you're doing. And if you have a quick answer to why you're doing it, ask again. Ask yourself a second question. When you understand what you're doing, then when the inevitable change happens, you'll be able to adapt because you really get it, as opposed to being thrown off track, because it isn't tracks, it's a big wide roadway.
As an executive coach that coaches people in the military, what are the most common subjects brought into the coaching room?
Confidence, I think, confidence in people's decision making. I think the dealing with uncertainty element, and people want tools and structures to do it rather than self-confidence to do it. And I think probably the final one is the bit about leadership. How do I go from transitioning to doing a work into leading a team and then leading a team of teams? How do I integrate? How do I get the most ideas out of these people? Because maybe the single biggest one that comes in is I don't get it and I don't know why.
This might sound like a stupid or insensitive question, given you've worked in the military in a war zone, but to you, what's the difference between the expression thriving versus surviving?
Um, I think it's different for everyone. And I think knowing what your version is a big difference, because one person's thriving might be another person's barely surviving. But for me, thriving is where 6 months' time is at least as good, if not better, as it was 6 months ago. Surviving, you're not making any headway, you're on a hamster wheel, nothing's improving.
I hate that expression too.
Thriving and surviving.
Yeah.
A bit like with the fake it till you make it, it's because they are easy platitudes that are thrown out with no thought behind them. I don't mind the phrase, I mind the fact there's no thought behind it.
What's the most overrated leadership quality in your minds?
I'm going to answer the what's the most misunderstood one, and I think that's the coaching leadership style. I think it is wildly misunderstood, and is taken as a bit of an abdication of the leadership role, because I'll just ask you, Lars, what you think the entire time, and I won't provide any actual leadership in there. So it is a important leadership quality, but not always well used.
Some people get it so wrong, where they just start to be asking questions when it's like, no, sorry, you've got a team member coming to you for help and advice quickly, you can't sit there and let them ask questions or
Oh, well, Lars, what do you think? I know what I think.
exactly.
I think I don't know the answer. Yeah, it's situational leadership.
Yeah.
Do the thing that is most appropriate at the time. If you're only doing one thing, you're a one-trick pony. It doesn't matter how good the trick is.
What's the most underrated thing about leadership out there?
I think if you look at the five different sort of styles of leadership from Daniel Goleman, it's the authoritative one. So it's the confident, positive, the one that really clearly sets an example and drives people towards a goal in the short term. And the word drives is appropriate in this instance. We have a time pressure, we have a resource pressure, we have to get a task done. In my context, you're on a deployment for a month or so. It's a high intensity, short period. That's what gets results. Because it's not enduring, it currently has a really bad rap. But there is a time and a place for that. You just have to know when to flex in and out of it.
What's the fastest way to lose trust as a leader?
Not have your words and actions match. If you say that you will do one thing and you either don't follow through or you do the opposite, then people will not trust you again. And whether that's a really big thing or a really small thing, then that takes a huge amount of time and effort to get back.
What does resilience actually look like? I know it's a vague term for companies and employees, but what does it look like to the average Joe Blow out there?
It means what works for you. And for some people, that will be working at 9 o'clock in the evening because their family situation means that it's better for them to do stuff differently in the evening. So it's not knocking off at a certain time, it's not going for a run at a certain time. It's doing the things that work for you, that are sustainable, that broadly speaking keep you happy, and that give you most of the opportunities that you want on a recurring basis.
What are three questions that a leader should ask themselves every day?
What's my blind spot? Who can I go to tell me what that blind spot is? And what can I do just 10% better than I did yesterday?
What do you wish more leaders understand about performance?
That it isn't the same for everyone. And if performance and what you're looking to achieve doesn't manifest for the same for everybody, that the solution can't be the same for everybody. And that getting the best performance out of you and a team takes time. But if you invest that time up front, the returns are enormous. If you try and do the bare minimum, you'll get the bare minimum.
What advice would you give to a leader that has inherited a team they don't know?
Ask more questions. Listen way more than you talk. Ask to understand. Ask people what is good as well as what doesn't work. And be clear about what you can achieve. In terms of what can break trust, if you go in and say that you've listened, I've heard all of your things, and we're going to change this big list of things. If you've only got time to change two things, be honest. Tell them you've only got time to change two things and ask them to pick two. And if you can't do the first one, tell them. Clarity is kindness. Be clear with people.
Thank you, Baz. It's been great to have you here on this interview and podcast. Baz, it's been an absolute pleasure and an inspiration. I've learned so much from you in just this short time. You can find Baz on the bookme.pro website. If anything resonated or you liked the program, please either hit a like button or even comment and interact with us. That really helps the channel out. Until next time, this is the Anti-Self-Help Guy. See you later.